Here's why you ought to be for Barack Obama. Number one, he's got the right philosophy. He knows you have to grow an economy from the ground up, not from the top down. Number two, he's got better answers for the economy, for energy, for health care, for education. He knows what it will take to get this country back on track. I have carefully read everything these candidates have put out. And I'm telling you, it matters, because the history is this. Notwithstanding what people think about us politicians, the truth is, virtually every person elected president does his, and someday I hope her, very best. Very best. Every president does his very best to keep the commitments made in the campaign. You need to know what they stand for. Obama's answers are better. Number three, he's got better understanding, better advisors, and better instincts on this economic stuff. We just have, all of us who've been involved in this have been through a very harrowing period these last few days, as you know. When all this happened, it was a matter that was unprecedented in the lifetimes of the people who were dealing with it. What did Barack Obama do? First of all, he got his advisors on the phone. Then he called all mine. Then he called some more. And you know what he said? Tell me what the problem is and how to fix it, and don't bother me with the politics. Let's do the right thing, and we'll sell it to America.
This is the unemployment rate during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' net worth during that same time span. From March to June 2020, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos saw his wealth rise by an estimated $48 billion. The founder of the video conferencing platform Zoom grew his nest egg by over $2.5 billion. And former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer's net worth increased by $15.7 billion. These kinds of examples might lead you to think that when billionaires profit during a crisis, it's just a matter of right place, right time. Well, that's not false, but it's not entirely true either. Casino magnate Sheldon Adelson saw his wealth increase by $5 billion, while Elon Musk saw an increase of $17.2 billion. When you add up the numbers, billionaires in the United States have increased their total net worth $637 billion during the COVID-19 pandemic so far. At the same time, more than 40 million Americans filed for unemployment. With tens of millions of Americans out of a paycheck, and the stock market plummeting by 37% in March, how is it that the rich have continued getting richer?
And let me just say, I know that all across America, anything that Congress does this week is going to be unpopular, but here's why you ought to be for action. It has nothing to do with bailing out Wall Street. The Wall Street that we knew is gone. It vanished in 2 months. There is not a single freestanding investment bank left on Wall Street. The last two, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, become bank holding companies, which means they are going to be regulated and they will never again be able to make some of the high-risk investments that got us in this trouble. That is not the issue. Here's the problem. When people lose confidence in the financial system, they lose confidence in all of it. People have lost confidence in their local banks. Bank accounts are only insured up to $100,000. That's more than most people have, but not more than small businesses and not so small businesses and wealthy people have. Everybody I know in the county where Hillary and I live that's got more than $100,000 in the bank is trying to figure out how to take it out of a bank and put it somewhere else. The less money in the bank, the less money they have to loan. That means small businesses can't get loans. The biggest car dealership in America last week stopped financing new cars. It means sooner or later you won't be able to buy a refrigerator on an installment plan. That's what it means. This is all about America. This is not about them. It's about having a credible stock market so if you got a 401k plan, your retirement is not utterly destroyed by people who made decisions that have nothing to do with the investments that were made on your behalf.
This is not just a plan to hand over $700 billion of your money to a few banks. If this is managed correctly, we will hopefully get most or all of our money back. We might even turn a profit on the government's investment. every penny of which will go directly back to you, the investor. The rescue plan now includes these four principles. It also includes a proposal I made yesterday morning to expand federal deposit insurance for families and small businesses across America who've invested their money in our banks. This will give a boost to small businesses, making our banking system more secure and helping restore confidence by reassuring families and businesses that their money is safe. But even with all these taxpayer protections, this plan is not perfect. Democrats and Republicans in Congress have legitimate concerns about it. I know many Americans share these concerns. It is clear, though, that this is what we have to do right now to prevent a crisis from turning into a catastrophe. And that's why I've been reaching out to leaders in both parties to do whatever I can to help pass this plan. That's why I'll be flying back to Washington today to cast my vote to safeguard the American economy.
Story time by Tommy Nation Politics.
Life's a show and we all play our parts. And when the music starts, we open up our hearts. It's alright if some things come out wrong. We'll sing a happy song and you can sing along. Where there's life, there's hope. Every day's a gift. Wishes can come true. It's while you work so hard all day to be like other girls, to fit in this glittering world. Don't give me songs. Don't give me songs. Give me something to sing about. La 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 la. Please, I need something to sing about. La 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 la. Life's a show you don't get to rehearse, and every single verse can make it that much worse. Still my friends don't know why I ignore the million things or more I should be dancing for. All the joy life sends, family and friends, all the twists and bends, knowing that it ends. Well, that depends on if they let you go, or if they know enough to know. And when you vowed you leave the crowd, give me something to sing about. There was no pain, no fear, no doubt, till they pulled me out of heaven. So that's my refrain. I live in hell, 'cause I've been expelled from heaven. I think I was in heaven. So give me something to sing about. Please, I need something to sing about. Life's not a song. Life isn't bliss. Life is just this. It's living. that you feel, it only can heal by living. You gotta go on living. So one of us is living. So one of us is living. Living life. That's life. Liberty. That's life. That's life. Where do we go from here? Where that takes us? That is the eerie question in the Twilight Zone.
Welcome to Tommy Nation Politics Tuesday live stream. Code name entitled Oligarchs. We'll be discussing them today.
Now here's something you are not going to hear on the mainstream media.
Buckle up.
What you do hear is warmongers arguing that we must protect Ukraine because it is a quote-unquote democracy. But they're lying. Ukraine isn't actually a democracy. For example, to hold on to power, Ukraine's president shut down the 3 TV stations that were openly criticizing him and his policies, imprisoned the head of the opposition political party that had come in second place in their elections, and went and arrested and jailed that party's leaders. This is exactly what Putin has been accused of doing. But Ukraine did this all with the support of the United States.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today?
Here's the thing that's on my mind right now. So I'm watching the news
Totally open-minded.
this weekend, and it's a 5-alarm inflation fire. Every newscast, I'm jumping with it. Tonight, inflation, families, hundreds of dollars extra a week, a month. When will it end? 7%, 10%. And I'm like, oh my God, this inflation has now gotten to a point where it's really beginning to affect people's bottom line. And they start going into the why of it, right? And the why of it is supply chain and pandemic and all these different things, and nobody can keep things on the shelves and demand. And I'm thinking to myself, I think we're missing one small part of this, and that is these companies are making record profits. Like when they keep talking about controlling inflation, they keep talking about we got to raise the interest rates and try and retame this tiger, and it's the only thing you can do. And yet there is one other thing that we haven't ever considered, and that is these companies don't necessarily have to jack up their prices.
The amount the prices have been raised is far more than the cost of putting those products on the shelf. So it's just a choice.
Boom.
And it's so funny that it's like prices are going up. What do we do? It's this complex problem, and no one's like, wait, have people just made the prices more?
Yes.
That's the part that always confuses me. It's like inflation is always something that just happens to companies where it's like I don't know what's going on. Versus people being in the boardroom being like, we're gonna charge $3 more.
Yeah.
And by the way, only happens when you raise people's wages.
And a White House official tells ABC News the U.S. is expected to announce new sanctions against Russian oligarchs today. Meanwhile, U.S. allies are even seizing super yachts belonging to oligarchs in European ports. French authorities say they've seized a yacht in southern France belonging to the director of the Russian oil company Rosneft. And Forbes reports Germany seized a $600 million yacht owned by a Russian industrial magnate. Let's bring in Paul Massaro, a senior policy advisor for the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, for more on this. Paul, thanks for being here. President Biden created a task force to go after Russian oligarchs. So what is the administration hoping to accomplish with that?
So this task force is really something extraordinary, something we've been pushing for a very long time. This task force is a group of a lot of different law enforcement agencies in the country. It's going to work across borders, use civil asset forfeiture and criminal authorities to crack down on these oligarchs, these corrupt billionaires who are part of Putin's regime, who live in the West and undermine our system from within.
Now, what role do these oligarchs play in the Russian government? What separates them from just rich people in Russia?
Well, in a sense, they are the rich people in Russia. Russia is actually one of the most economically unequal places on earth, massive wealth inequality. It's been said there are no millionaires in Russia, only billionaires, and these are those billionaires. The Russian state is made up of sort of Putin's elites, who are kind of the government officials around him, what are called the Siloviki security services. These are the individuals who push people out windows and poison people. As I saw Leonid Volkov just said, one of Leonid Volkov, of course, who works for with Alexei Navalny, and then the oligarchs who actually live abroad and are Putin's sort of eyes and ears abroad. They are in our system, working to subvert our commerce, subvert our democratic process, subvert the rule of law from within.
So are they offering any reaction to having things like their yachts seized?
Yeah, I mean, they are. They are scared. They have made statements, nothing immediately critical of Putin. I think they're tiptoeing around that, being very careful, but saying that the war must end, war is bad, that sort of thing. But ultimately, what it's going to take is a continued crackdown and forcing these individuals to sleep in the bed they've made, force them to live in the oppressive system they've created in Russia. And then maybe they'll start thinking, wow, perhaps Putin has gone a step too far.
Now, do these oligarchs have any real power over Putin? What's the end game here?
Yes, they do. I mean, they're part of the Russian elite. They're part of sort of these three circles that run the Putin state. And their job is really to be abroad. Their job is to be Putin's wallets, to be Putin's voice in the West. So when you force them to go back and live in Russia, they can no longer do that job, but they're also denied the luxurious lifestyles, and also, maybe most importantly, the independence from Putin that they've enjoyed. So suddenly they are much more vulnerable to Putin's expropriation, to Putin's attacks, and so on and so forth. And that's when maybe they start thinking, well, maybe Russia should be run in a different way.
And so what do they do with that? Even if they all think that, what happens in a government run the way Russia's is?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the question. Can Putin come around? Can these individuals exert influence upon Putin? Can they exert influence upon the Siloviki? Can they exert influence upon the elites? Can they sort of change Putin's course? Or at the end of the day, is it going to take a different government in Russia?
All right, Paul Massaro, we appreciate the analysis, Paul. Thank you.
The consolidation of America's wealth by the richest 1% over the last few decades has made it to the point now where your voice doesn't really fucking matter. Both the financial and political leverage of most Americans has now become so cartoonishly reduced that it's pretty much non-existent. Those experiencing financial hardships for the first time right now may be tempted to think their story is unique and everyone else is a bum. Please resist that urge. To quote Jimmy Dore of YouTube fame, if you find yourself being angry at someone lower on the economic ladder than you, there's a pretty good chance you're being manipulated by someone higher on the economic ladder than you. If you're an American who over the years has made even a modest effort to try to get basic healthcare improvements and education here in America, it must really piss you off seeing the Federal Reserve just cranking out trillions of dollars left and right for banks and corporations so that they don't suffer through these very hard times. Since the COVID outbreak first began, the net worth of the richest Americans has exploded, while basic care in America continues to be complete shit. It can be challenging in times like these to not become completely depressed and hopeless and feel like we're on a fucking way to nowhere. But, though the consolidation of wealth in America is unprecedented even by robber baron standards, it's nothing new. Karl Marx pointed out, the accumulation of wealth at one pole is at the same time the accumulation of misery, agony of toil, slavery, ignorance, brutality, mental degradation at the opposite. The natural inclination should be to fight back against such gross injustice. But the broken two-party system in America and the corporate lapdog media, which works for both parties honestly, has no desire to either inform Americans or do anything aside from a kabuki theater where both sides pretend to disagree while voting for the same awful things that fuck all of us and only benefit a few rich people and corporations.
Russian oligarchs, they're on everyone's minds in the wake of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. You've probably heard about the insane amounts of hidden wealth they have.
Oligarchs buy mansions and condos in Florida, apartments in New York, yachts, even sports teams.
That's who the Russian leadership are. They have a lot of money, even though it's hidden away.
Gaga is set to perform on a Russian business tycoon's billion-dollar yacht, cashing in a paycheck of nearly $3 million.
And you might have heard that the American government is taking action.
Tonight, I say to the Russian oligarchs and the corrupt leaders who built billions of dollars off this violent regime, we're coming for your ill-begotten gains.
But if America is really going to rein in the power of Russian oligarchy, we need to reckon with the fact that we created the system that allows them to hide their stolen wealth. That's right, America let Russian billionaires exploit our financial system through lax rules and hidden loopholes, and they're not the only ones doing it. American and European billionaires stash their riches exactly the same way. We have an opportunity right now to shut down this shadowy world of offshore finance. It's not just a way to pressure Putin's Russia, it's also a way to make sure oligarchs from around the world have less control of our economy and politics. What is an oligarch anyway? Well, an oligarchy is basically a small group of wealthy elites who control the politics and laws of a nation's government. The word is almost always used by Western media to refer to Russian oligarchy. These are a small set of ultra-wealthy business magnates who have had tremendous power in Russia over the last few decades. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Soviet Union, most of the Russian economy was transferred from government control to private ownership in a process referred to as shock therapy. Encouraged by Western economists like Larry Summers, industries that had previously been state-run were handed over at bargain prices to the Kremlin's cronies. In the absence of any government oversight or competition, these new capitalists quickly became billionaire elites with vast control of the economy and government, otherwise known as an oligarchy. When Russia entered the world of global capitalism in 1991, the men who became oligarchs were pleased to discover a shadow financial system, flush with dark money and shielded from the law. It's a complicated and secretive network of tax havens and shell companies. We've seen in recent leaks like the Panama Papers that this shadow system has enabled the global financial elite to shield trillions of dollars from taxation or law enforcement. This system allows rich people, criminals, and crooked public officials around the world to hide money for tax evasion, money laundering, and corruption of all kinds. But here's the thing, it was European and American bankers, lawyers, and lobbyists that built this corrupt system in the first place. Russian oligarchs hide their wealth in the shadows, and we were the ones that turned off the lights in the first place. Here are some of the ways they exploited our rules. Russian billionaires used shell companies to hide their ownership and avoid a tax bill. Oligarchs set up shell companies in places like Delaware and Bermuda, notorious tax havens. They take advantage of American and European laws which allow corporate owners to set up companies with virtually no disclosure requirements. In fact, more than half of Russian billionaires' wealth is stored abroad. Oligarchs purchase high-rise apartments in Manhattan and London to launder their money. Billions of dollars of dirty money pouring into places like London and New York has contributed to making homes unaffordable for working people and turned housing, which should be a human right, into an accounting unit for Kremlin money launderers. That's why you may have noticed in the news that the mega yachts being seized in the last few weeks were located in places like Barcelona, the French Riviera, and the Maldives. These yachts are grotesque displays of the oligarchs' wealth. The oligarchs also use Swiss bank accounts to hide their money, up to $150 billion worth, according to an estimate from a leading Swiss paper produced this week. At the end of the 1990s, after Russian oligarchy had taken hold, a strongman emerged, Vladimir Putin. Putin came to power with the support of Russia's oligarchs. Putin himself has amassed vast wealth, and by some measures is the wealthiest man in the world. Putin has reportedly spent $1 billion to build himself a 123,785 square foot palace, which is nearly double the size of Buckingham Palace. Once in office, Putin crushed Russia's independent-minded oligarchs. Then, with the support of those that remained, he gradually moved Russia from a failing democracy with freedom of speech to a dictatorship governed with fear and violence. Once, Putin worked for the oligarchy. Now, the oligarchy works for Putin.
This is Tommy Nation Politics. Free thinking, innovative, totally open-minded, new progressive media. And we are the People's Court tonight. Here we have a few cases of bandwagon mentality beats social norms and conventional wisdom. It's up to you to figure out which is which. If you can't seem to do that, you might just ask yourself one question. Am I a cuck? I hope not. But if you were, you probably wouldn't be watching or listening to Tommy Nation Politics. You are, thank you for watching or listening. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, www.tommynationpolitics.com/TommyNationPolitics, Facebook.com. If you want to send us messages, this is the People's Court. Dun dun dun.
Oligarchs. American oligarchs, Russian oligarchs. From President Biden's wonderful State of the Union. Tonight I say to the Russian oligarchs and to the corrupt leaders who have built billions of dollars off this violent regime, no more. The United States Department of Justice is assembling a dedicated task force to go after the crimes of Russian oligarchs. We are joining with our European allies to find and seize your yachts, your luxury apartments, your private jets. We are coming for your ill-begotten gains. With these words, the president unintentionally laid out a blueprint for, let's just say, responding to the American oligarchs who dwarfed the Russian oligarchs in wealth and political power and tripled their wealth within the pandemic that year alone. Joe Biden might think that the Russian oligarchs have built trillions of dollars from their country, but the violent regime, as he calls it, it's not possible to condemn those and not the ones who perpetrated the funneling, the engagement in our democratic process. Yes, guys, the American oligarchs. Remember them?
U.S. media tycoon Michael Bloomberg quits the Democratic presidential race Wednesday, March 4. He is now endorsing frontrunner Joe Biden after being snubbed by voters on Super Tuesday despite blowing more than $500 million on his campaign. The 78-year-old former mayor of New York tweets, "Defeating Trump starts with uniting behind the candidate with the best shot to do it. It's clear that is my friend and a great American, Joe Biden."
Who dwarf their Russian counterparts in wealth. America's oligarchs, like their Russian counterparts, have built billions. No, make that
so
trillions.
Let me ask you, Mr. Bezos, does Amazon ever access and use third-party seller data when making business decisions?
About that violent regime business, guys. It's possible to condemn the violence perpetrated by Russia's government while at the same time recognizing and condemning
but I can't
the war crimes and atrocities of our own guys. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, other countries have matched the proxy violence that we have funded in nations like Palestine, in Venezuela.
It's just a matter of right place.
We've taken countless lives, done countless coups.
But it's not entirely true either.
Different forms of bloodshed. Don't pretend that we don't do proxy wars, and don't pretend we're not in foreign wars. 8, to be exact. Trillions of dollars from their regime. They've built trillions. Let me tell you about trillions, guys. Let me tell you about violence. Let me tell you about defense contract entities like Halliburton, Lockheed Martin, and the Carlyle Group.
More than 40 million.
A 2014 Princeton political study showed that government actions nearly always conform to the wishes of the wealthy and powerful.
Continued getting richer.
Es que vengan a ver Venezuela, que nos vengan a conocer.
Well, the message that I send to all investors is to come see Venezuela. Come get to know us, to come, so that you can see the impact that you're going to have when you cross the airport, when you get to know our entrepreneurs, when you get to know our human qualities, when you get to know the potentialities that we have in tourism, in oil, in petrochemistry, in refining, in heavy industry, well, in iron, in bauxite, in gold, minerals, in technology, well, and a world of opportunities. Venezuela, I tell you, Eric, and you can prove it as you go through the years, you'll remember this thing that I'm going to tell you. Venezuela is going to become the land of opportunities for investment, present and future. All the conditions needed are here for the country to have a new takeoff on new foundations, for the development and for the investment to fulfill what we've talked about, the win-win. We guarantee that here.
Será difícil o posiblemente imposible.
It will be difficult to impossible to re-energize the economy without access to international capital markets. Difficult. Will that require a restructuring of your foreign debt? Surely.
That's right.
What would be a reasonable discount for your creditors?
Look, we've declared a renegotiation of the debt, and we are in contact with all the bondholders. They know that we want to pay. It's our obligation and our duty. And we have a plan to make a reorganization and generate the resources that in a progressive way go toward a normalization in the levels of payment. Now, that merits that the holders achieve basic conditions with the government of the United States, with the Western powers of G7, so that Venezuela can have access to those capital markets, so that Venezuela can regularize. That's why I say to you, if I had here the $17 billion that we owe at this moment, that we weren't able to pay because of the sanctions, I wouldn't be able to do it. So there are many things to change. There are many things to change.
And the wishes of we the people, not so much, but economic elite interest groups, guys, think tanks, U.S. government policy, they shape. And the Americans who have no influence are the ones who this country was made for. Yeah, the man, the working man, the man that seeks life, liberty, and happiness.
News tonight on the pandemic here and the possibility of a fourth COVID shot, essentially the second booster. Moderna executives signaling today that they believe their second booster could be needed this fall, particularly for vulnerable people.
These gangbanging parties, the Republicans and the Democrats.
We need to take these people on. They are often connected to big drug cartels. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And the president has asked the FBI to launch a very concerted effort against gangs everywhere.
Economic elites and interest groups. They shape U.S. governance and U.S. governing policy. But Americans who are less well off have essentially no influence over what their government does. A government by the people, for the people. It's supposed to be a free market, supposed to be a free people. Manifest destiny to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, guys. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, not sales worldwide of arms. The Center for Responsive Politics reports that in the past 2 decades, the arms industry's extensive network of lobbyists and donors, they've directed $285 million in campaign finance contributions and $2.5 billion in lobbying, spending to influence defense policy, spending to influence healthcare policy, spending to influence police policy. It's kind of Orwellian, guys. How the private sector shrewdly concentrates on different aspects of our government in order to advance their own agendas. And then they pump their ill-begotten gains into our government. This ensures that their interests are represented, guys, by people who are only puppets of the rich, legislators and lawmakers in name only. It puts those officials on notice that there's lucrative futures in store for them who follow the conventional wisdom, the social norms of bribery, ill-begotten gains, money laundering, and other horribly nefarious and at times slightly racist laws and results of it, i.e. Bloomberg's stop and frisk.
This is how you describe your policing policy as mayor. Quote, we put all the cops in the minority neighborhoods. And you explain that as, quote, because that's where all the crime is. You went on to say, and the way you should get the guns out of the kids' hands is to throw them against the wall and frisk them. You've apologized for that policy, but what does that kind of language say about how you view people of color or people in minority neighborhoods?
Well, if I go back and look at my time in office, the one thing that I'm really worried about, embarrassed about, was how it turned out with stop and frisk. When I got into office, there were 650 murders a year in New York City. And I thought that my first responsibility was to give people the right to live. That's the basic right of everything. And we adopted a policy which had been in place, the policy that all big police departments use of stop and frisk. What happened, however, was it got out of control. And when I discovered that we were doing too many stop and frisks, we cut 95% of it out. And I've sat down with a bunch of African-American clergy and business people to talk about this, to try to learn. I've talked to a number of kids who'd been stopped. And I was trying to understand how we change our policies so we can keep the city safe, because the crime rate did go from 650, 50% down to 300. And we have to keep the lid on crime, but we cannot go out and stop people indiscriminately.
Mayor, thank you. Let me go to Vice President Biden.
They're not interested in us. They're interested in the dominant dollar, the most resourceful means. And the dollar has been resourceful from Trump's doubling of the deficit to now Joe Biden's almost tripling of the deficit, then in the State of the Union promising that he's going to actually cut the deficit in half. I would like to see that happen. I know he's a liar. But it's funny, guys, that all of these people in his cabinet, Anthony Blinken, he was in a private equity investment firm, guys, with access and expertise in the defense industry. And that's how he became Secretary of the State. The technology of Raytheon was influencing the Raytheon board, former Gina Haspel, women. How did she get all of that money, guys, making bombs for the military? Oh, it was the drone strikes in weddings and hospitals that WikiLeaks told us about, guys. I call those ill-begotten gains. I call Jeff Bezos building his Amazon empire off of his ability to sell products online and then burning all the bridges and owning all of the e-commerce patents and copyrights. Making sure that he doesn't pay taxes through loopholes that his wonderful friends at the Washington Post point out as immaterial. Purchasing the most influential paper in the nation's tabloid, the Washington Post, guys. Jeff Bezos. There was never a constantly monolithic monopoly. There was never in a history than what it is now, guys. It's almost like feudalism. It's almost like King George, but without the crown. But billions of subsidies and contracts for their automobile ventures, their wonderful farming ventures, their agricultural ventures, and now their COVID vaccine ventures, their patents and strategies. Their oligarchical status knows no bounds. And their insurance executives have bilked billions from the violence of our privatized healthcare system, the system which takes an estimated lives a year because of the bad and non-accessible healthcare. But the Russian oligarchs, guys, your yachts, your luxury apartments, your private jets, we are coming for your ill-begotten means. Ill-begotten means, guys. Ill-begotten means like bombing the Middle East, making the sand turn to glass with your bombing and shelling, to the point where we take their oil and Halliburton makes billions of dollars in oil subsidies, producing $755 billion in revenue. Now, all the Russian oligarchs, guys, their super yachts, their little penthouses in the Ukraine, from their American oligarchical counterparts, these guys are nothing but Social Security welfare queens. They can't compare to Bezos. They can't compare to Bloomberg, who spent $960 million on the Democratic Party, financing, making sure that his will was heard in the primaries. And it was definitely heard. Behave. Yes, guys, we're back to the shareholders. We're back to the not so free market. We're back to the little oligarchs, big oligarchs. We're told the Russians, whose yachts have been seized, including Alisher Usamanov, whose net worth is $20 billion, and Alexei Mordashov, whose wealth is described as nearly $30 billion. How can these people compare to $800 billion? Jeff Bezos. $200 billion, supposedly Bloomberg. And who else? Soros? Adelson? All of these billionaires are gigantically wealthy compared to these oligarchs in Russia. And think, guys, before the pandemic began, they were only $100 billion heirs. Now they're $800 billion heirs, guys. And why is that? The 10 richest men in the world, yes, they're all men, own more wealth than the bottom 3.1 billion people. That's the 90% combined. If the 10 richest men, 9 of whom live in the US, lost 99.999% of their combined wealth, they would still be richer than the 99% of the world. Now that's oligarchy. That's making a killing. That's making an industry. That's being innovative with business. That's taking advantage of the government-granted patent monopolies like Big Pharma, the military-industrial complex, and all of the hedge fund managers on Wall Street that bet against the American people. That's just a little bit, kind of more of a taste to the oligarchs that we in the West are used to. Usamanov? Was Usamanov mentioned in Forbes? Was he mentioned holding patents on COVID-19 vaccines? And Moderna's having their fourth shot. Who would have thought?
Pandemic here and the possibility of a fourth COVID shot, essentially the second booster. Moderna executives signaling today that they believe their second booster could be needed this fall, particularly for vulnerable people as immunity wanes and if any potential new variants emerge. The company right now is developing a booster targeting both the Delta and Omicron variants. So far, the CDC only recommending another booster for the immunocompromised.
Their $5.3 trillion growth, guys. From before the pandemic, $1.8 trillion in gains. Yes, that's gains, guys, because they're making pharmaceuticals. Now they're at $5.8 trillion in adjusted gross profit. How much is that in taxes? Well, we will never know. We'll never know, guys. We'll just speculate. We'll speculate as the wealthy fuel our government's benign view of their predatory business. And once the pandemic finishes its wonderful crisis, not letting a good crisis go to waste, their political power, into exclusive patents and rights to COVID-19 vaccines, farmland, agricultural business, and also internet and e-commerce business. I anticipate that's going to make them even more adjusted gross income. And the billions of dollars in funding from the commitments of the United States governments to these pet projects of the rich, they will continue as well. Because there's only one in this United States of America. It's not to work for the common good, be free thinking. It's not to be the people of the United States. We must ensure the domestic tranquility. To continuously rob through criminal enterprises the American people and never address any of their issues, but divide us, maintain power, while the 9 American billionaires acquire $755 billion during the COVID-19 pandemic. 8 million Americans slipped into poverty below the poverty line. And as we put sanctions on the Russian people, these oligarchs might feel the squeeze of their businesses, but the most squeeze that they're feeling isn't the crumbling of their rubles, which they can amass anytime by loans, by whatever. They have resources. What about the working people of Russia? What about the income inequality and social injustice that lives among every working person, every middle-class person on the face of the earth, and the entitlement and greed of the untaxed, the 1%? Would not this be an unprecedented time, guys, to revive a proposal from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt for 100% war super tax? I propose that, Joe. I propose 100% war tax. Let's see if your little estate tax could compare. You might think that you're a left-winger raising taxes on the middle class after Trump cut the taxes. They expired for the middle class, of course. But he did cut taxes for the middle class. Now you're going to raise taxes, and the 1% still have a 99% windfall on gains. And the richest men tripled their wealth last year. And in 48 hours, you bailed out the banks, the military-industrial complex, and Wall Street. In 48 hours, while giving 6 months for a COVID relief bill debate. Guys, the only action we can take right now is to work for the common good. Together. And to agree that when these politicians do not do what they say they're going to do, we hold them accountable. And we don't vote for Trump or vote for Biden or the lesser of two evils. We hold our political leaders accountable for their actions. And we start promoting the general welfare. Working together for the common good.
Yeah!
But until then, someone asked me, guys, why do you hate billionaires? Well, the answer is I don't. I've met a few. They were always sociable people. I mean, they live, they breathe, they're human beings. They, have emotions and feelings. But see, once their emotions and feelings, they can become happier. While we have to go through our emotions working and making sure that we're good citizens, they're free to express themselves and have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No, that's not the promise in the Constitution. The promise in the Constitution, guys, was that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah!
So, what have we learned in this live stream? Have we learned anything? Shh. I'm mulling it over, guys, but what I am learning is that we keep letting our politicians put the speck in the eyes of foreign countries while their planks are walking around destroying our country. Until kicking the can down the road till there's no more road, tripling the deficit, polluting our oceans, and Gotta be free-thinking, innovative, and open-minded. Tommy Nation Politics.
Free
Hey guys, this is
thinking,
Tommy,
innovative,
Tommy Nation
and
Politics.
totally
How's everyone doing
open-minded.
today?
Tommy Nation Politics.
Hey guys, this is Tommy, Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing?
People like structure. To have a mind of one's own is resisting the flow of the masses, which generates